Welcome back to another episode of Buckle Up, an ultra running conversation with Simon and Brian. Simon, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Brian. I had my first race of the year. Now, people say it was a last year thing. I say,
Mm,
nay. I decided that it was this year thing. Mostly because you've known my kind of training cycle a little bit or running cycle, right? And I had a gap in November, December, and then I'm starting again. So it felt like okay, now I'm testing myself, and it went pretty well. I had some actually knee pain, but otherwise I was okay. How about yourself? How are your knees, Brian?
my knees are doing well. My Achilles is on the mend, and tomorrow I start PT. So I'm maybe not excited, but I'm looking forward to getting some additional exercises. I've been doing it all and researching it all by myself. So I'm excited to get some additional exercises. I feel like I'm doing a good job, but probably could be doing better. I'm not a physical therapist, so why try and fake it, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely value to dealing with someone who's a professional, has seen a lot of different other cases, and especially I don't know if your physiotherapist is specialized in endurance sport, but there's something to be said about having that extra wealth of knowledge and that outsider's perspective, because what could be normal for us is potentially not normal. It's like that kind of pain is not normal, and they will notice things. So there's huge value, and obviously you're training for a pretty big year, right? I don't know how much of it is public, but you have some pretty cool plan for this year.
I do. We are recording on January the 6th. I do have a fairly decent season. I have potentially five big 100s coming up. This Saturday, I'll know if I get in the lottery for Vermont, which will round out the Grand Slam. And then in October, I'll add on the Hell Creek Pure Hell 140. It's a 20-mile loop, but you do it 7 times in Kansas.
That is the
So
most random thing I've ever heard, but please go on.
it
Why
is kind
did,
of
did,
random.
did they say why 140?
No idea.
Okay.
Because it's way tougher than 100. There is a 100 mile distance as well, and I think there's even a 20 and a 60 if I'm not mistaken.
But no 120.
No 120. It's 140 or 100.
All makes sense to me.
Yeah,
But
it's totally obviously. What, you've never ran a 140 before?
I have not actually, but I was gonna go there, but instead I'm gonna go somewhere else, Brian, which is you might see behind me these cool trophy for people who are watching. These are the Grand Slam trophy. And so I did the Grand Slam, which is a great experience. I think honestly nowadays, the hardest part about the Grand Slam is getting in those races, especially if you want to do it through Western State. But what I did love about these races is that these are all old races, historical races in the US that have kind of built a little bit what is the scene today. So the races in question, it's you do 4 out of 5 in the same summer. We're talking about Old Dominion, Western States. So these two are the oldest in the US. They're basically from the same time. And you have Leadville, Vermont, and Wasatch. So very cool experience. And it reminds me of the guests that we had today, that we discussed today, which have been a pioneer of the sport and has really established what is ultra running to a very large extent.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this guest. I already edited and we've already recorded it. And it's a little bit dated, but I'm really excited to share this in the first week of the year to get people pumped up, hopefully, for the summer. Marshall Ulrich is a complete legend in the space. He is one of the founding fathers of ultra running. He was there at the beginning. He was there at the beginning of the Grand Slam of ultra marathons. He's done Badwater, I think, on the books 20 times, off the books another 10, quad crossing. He's done 7 summits, all 7 highest peaks in 7 continents, all on his first attempt. He is one of the founding fathers of ultra running in our space.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's others, but I think what he's done is really absolutely amazing. A lot of mental toughness and resilience. And in the episode, we actually talk a little bit about what was his journey. How did he found himself doing these races, which back then was way more niche than it is today. And it's actually quite interesting for me. I mean, I feel like such a newcomer to the sport, and hearing some of the things he would describe, how bad water used to be, how much it would cost, how many people would do these races, just thinking about something like, hey, you want to run Western State next week, and then it's just, yeah, okay, let's just sign up. Things have evolved, I think, for the better. The democratization of the sport is something that I see as positive, or people are getting into that, but it's good to keep in touch with kind of the people that had it a little bit rougher, or different, at least when it was not as mainstream, when it was not the live stream for hard rock, following people, and
Mhm.
just you do whatever. And I think the science of the sport has also very much evolved. And whereas we have a lot of knowledge nowadays as to what is good practice and what is bad practice, they had to figure that out. They had no clue back then, which I don't think we necessarily talk about in the episode. But I think that's something that for me was interesting when talking with people with a lot of experience like that.
Yeah, very much. It must have been similar to the Wild West of old, and just free for all, willy nilly. You signed up last minute. You showed up with a check, I bet, because you know
People were using check back then.
there was no Ultra sign up, but there is Ultra sign up today, and Marshall still wants to contribute to this community, and really still wants to be a part of it, even if he can't participate in the way that he had in the past. And he's doing that now. We just had the third annual running of the Route 66 Ultra Run. It is, I think, it might be 140 miles. Was it 140?
I don't know. We should know, but we don't know. So you'll have to
Well,
listen to the episode.
yeah, he created the Route 66 Ultra Run for our community and to still hold space in the community as well. It's a great cause. It's a worthy, noble charity that he's raising money for. His friend Mark Macy struggling with some Alzheimer's, and he's doing his part to help his friend out. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll catch up to you soon. We have lots of new episodes coming out, and until then, enjoy Marshall Ulrich. Take care.
That's
Marshall Ulrich, the legend. Gosh, I can't believe it. I've been excited, really excited all day long for this conversation. I've been thinking about my questions. I probably won't even get half of them answered because there's just so many of them I have. You've been in this space, in this ultra running, ultra distance, extreme endurance sport space for decades, and it's amazing. So we appreciate you coming on the show. How are you doing this evening?
Well, I'm doing great, especially talking to you two guys. What a privilege. I
It's
feel
actually our
honored.
privilege. Again, it's our privilege. But
For the record,
um,
Brian had one of his bibs signed by Marshall, and he never asked me to sign any of his bibs. So
yeah,
that
never,
that,
not
that
one.
should say how much we respect you. Or
Well,
how little Brian respects me. I don't know.
well, he's just not old enough. When he gets to be in his 60s or so, and you sign something, it's going to mean it.
Yeah, I
Something.
still have the bib in my garage, actually. So what Marshall's referencing is offline. We talked about how I met Marshall, and he was elusive. He was being elusive to who he was and what he's done, and I was catching on to him pretty quickly. And so I figured out who he was, and I went back and got my bicycle race bib for the Leadville Trail 100 bike ride because I didn't have a pen or a paper. I found a Sharpie in the camper, and I found my race bib. So I asked him to sign the back of the bib. And I got to the finish line that year, so maybe it was good luck, Marshall. I appreciate it, and I still have the bib in the garage. It's hanging on the wall. So thanks again for coming on. We usually start the show by asking, like, how did you get into this crazy space? What drove you to start doing these long distance endurance stuff? And quite honestly, like, when was that? Like, I mean, it was before what we know of ultra running this in this day and age currently. And so what did that look like back then? And how did you get into it?
Well, I have to go pretty far back to about 1978 or so. And let's see, I was 28 years old. And my wife was in the process of, she had gotten cancer and she was in the throes of going through chemotherapy. And what they discovered was that I had high blood pressure and developed that just because of the fact that she was sick. So what did the doctor said? Well, you can do a couple of things. You can either go on some sort of medication or, why don't you try exercise? And I thought, well, just putting on a pair of shoes and going out the back door and running, that'd be my deal. So I did that and got into it, jumped into it pretty quickly. I went from 5Ks in the same years. I started doing marathons, that first and second year. And I guess a few years later, I jumped into ultra marathoning. My first one was up in Cheyenne and it was a 50. I think, let's see, then I did a 24-hour in the Western States. I guess that must have been 87 or something like that. So it was fairly early on. And then that same year I did Leadville. So it was kind of because of my wife, and she did pass away at 30 years old. So, she only lasted a couple of years. And I think that's what really drove me. I was, it was people grieve in funny ways, and I just tried to avoid it. That was my way of doing it. And I avoided it for 10, 20 years. And so really I was just pounding the pavement trying to feel like I was a whole person again.
It's such a great story. I've read that before in your first book. I'm sorry, I've never said it to you publicly, but yeah, I'm sorry that you lost your wife in that way, in that horrible fashion, to a terrible disease of cancer.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. It does. It kind of throws your life in turmoil. But, my wife now, Heather, we've been married 22 years, and, she discovered me, or I guess I could say I discovered her, and she just kind of made me whole. So she's the real deal.
I have met Heather at the same time that I met you, and yeah, you guys are just the coolest couple. You guys were just hanging out at the campground in Leadville, being so nonchalant. So Heather seems like a great partner.
Yeah.
Marshall, what did the ultra running scene look like back there in late 1980s? I mean, gosh, the sport was so early. I think Leadville was like 83 was the first one. So gosh, it was only 3 or 4 years old. I mean, how crazy was Ken Klober then? And what were you using for gear? Like, what did that look like?
Well, the gear, the shoes were just a little bit simpler, I guess. You had your choice of, the Nike waffle pattern for the bottom of it. And, there were a few other shoes that were out there, but, there wasn't that much. There was just moderate cushioning. There was, some minimalistic type shoes, most of them, sort of a track style or something. So, the equipment wasn't that much different. You had a fanny pack instead of, hydration backpacks, if you will. But I think it was just a little bit simpler. There weren't huge crews that were out there. I think a lot of the people were just out there doing it on their own. I was, for the most part, just doing it on my own. And I'd travel from, one race to another and pretty much without a crew. And I'd usually fly in on a Friday night if I could get away with it. And then I was sitting in the office on a Monday morning. And a lot of my employees didn't even know that, what I'd done for the weekend. So it was very simplistic. And there were only, I think there was less than 10,000 ultra runners now. I have no idea how many there are now, but it was just, very bare bones type stuff. And, speaking of Ken Klober, of course, he used to run the race back then. And boy, he was just as much of a character then as he is now, just full of piss and vinegar. And he's always joking and, poking fun at you. If you weren't sucking it up, he'd give you a bad time about it. That's for sure. And of course, Mara Lee, his partner in crime, she was always just, she was kind of the glue that held everything together back in the day before Lifetime bought it.
Yeah, it must have been really different times. How did you even hear about the races back then? And I feel there were fewer, so maybe you didn't have as much of a choice. But is it mostly just a word of mouth and oh, that sounds cool, I'm gonna do it?
Yeah, and there weren't that many, as you were saying, because when I first got into it, I think there were 500 milers, trail 100 milers. That was it. And then they brought in Vermont, which was the 100 miler. And so that first year they brought in Vermont. And in fact, I did the Grand Slam. Plus, if you added two, and Gordon Hardman, who was one of the originators of hard rock, him and I did all six, and they called it the last great race, and I think they still do.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you just kind of heard about that stuff word of mouth, and it was a small group, so everybody knew what was going on. And for the most part, it was just more intimate. We all kind of knew each other and stuff. And if you ran a certain pace or something, you were pretty much with a lot of the same people. And it's a lot like it is now, where you're just out there kind of trying to have fun. And that's what attracted me to the sport is, everybody was rooting for each other, and it's difficult to run 100 miles. So, it takes, a little bit of fortitude and help from your friend and so on and so forth. So that's what drew me to ultra running in particular.
That's interesting. Do you have a favorite of the great last race or great? I don't know how to say it. You just said it though.
Oh, as far as the races, I kind of, tried to go back, for one reason or another to Badwater. And I think I liked it in particular because, you had heat. And at that time, it was 146 miles. So you went to the top of Whitney. So you had heat, you had cold, you had road, you had trail. And then, of course, when you get to the top of Whitney, you got to go back down. So you have 146 miles plus another 11 miles down. So I always thought it was more of in running. So it had a little bit of everything mixed in. And I think that's what attracted me to that. So, I still like it. And, I'll probably be out there. And, as for now, about all I want to do is just walk it. I'm not going to, I might jog a few sections of it, but I'm not interested in the racing aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
it definitely
rightfully
changed now.
so. Yeah.
We're starting in the evening, so I think that's going to make it easier to do that. But you have to reach it. Like the first cutoff is pretty rough, so I don't know how much you can actually walk to that first cutoff. But yeah, it's interesting to think how much things have changed actually. Because you're right, going up Whitney was pretty epic. You go from the lowest to the highest point, whereas now it's just like a teaser. You go to the trailhead. And if you want to do it, you have to have a permit, which is basically impossible. You're not doing it. It's too bad.
Yeah, so some of the history I started doing it in '90, and from 1990 until I think it was maybe '96 or '97 or something like that. It also started in the evening. Then it switched
Hmm.
over to a daytime, and then somewhere I think in the thousands, it switched back into the evening. And a lot of why that happened was because of what was dictated by the Rangers and things like that. So it became a little bit more political. And it has changed a lot because of that first Badwater I did. You had to be invited, which, you do now also. But the cost of entry was only $12.50. And I had that comped. Now, the other thing was too, is if you went out and ran it and won it, you get $1,000. And if you broke a record, you get another $1,000. So occasionally I'd go out there and walk away with a couple of $1,000 in my pocket. And the group size was, there was a couple of times there was, I think the minimum was 12, and then, it'd go up to fluctuate up to 20 and then 40 and 50. And now you have the limit at about 100 people. So, it has changed, and it used to be incredibly, I mean, we were like brothers and sisters out there running for the most part. It was really pretty cool.
I still think you have the record for the most Badwater finishes, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've got, I believe it's 20 finishes, and then I've got, I used to do quite a lot of different things on the side, so there's another 10 on top of that. And then
Mm-hmm.
most recently, I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago, I did what was a winter crossing, which I think was the most difficult just because you had to use your mountaineering skills to get up the mountain
Mm.
in January, February is the window for that. So I believe I'm the only one that's done that, and I'm waiting for one of you guys to come out and do it.
Well, Simon's well on his way. He's got one finish, and so just 20 more to get the record, Simon.
Yeah, I think that the $12 entry fee. Let's call it inflation.
There you go.
The winning $1,000 would not cover just the entry fee nowadays. So, and
Yeah.
I'm definitely not winning that. Some of the time also lately have been pretty impressive. So
Well,
it's interesting.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's the other change that I've seen is, guys like yourself, you're going out there and, you're busting, 22 hours, 22, 23 hours. I was lucky to hit 26 out there. So, guys have just gotten a lot faster, a little bit younger. It used to be more of an older guy sport, maybe 5 years older than it is now. I don't know what the average is, but it has changed. And, I think that's good. I think the more competition and, some people are actually out there. I just saw that, the gal who broke the Appalachian Trail, I see that she got a
Tara
sponsorship.
Dower.
Yeah, yeah. So she
Mhm.
can do it professionally. So you do have people that are out there doing it professionally. And we were out there just, we were just amateurs at it. So,
Yeah, but I mean, you guys were pioneer, and I think a lot of what I love about trail and on-trail running actually comes from you guys and the way the community was built. It's fine that we have competitive people, and that's totally okay, and I'm very happy that it's viable for some people. But the vast majority of people are there to hang out with their friend, push their limit, help each other out. And I think that's reflecting just the way you were describing how you and your guys were running Western State, maybe even signing up 2 weeks before and not having to be on the lottery for 10 years and just hanging out, having fun. And then you see each other also at Old Dominion, I presume, and then Badwater. And it's all of the same kind of group of people. And I think this small community vibe is really important. But what we see also is that now it's growing, becoming very accepting of anyone and everyone. But then you have pro runner. I heard Tara's contract was $250,000. I don't know if it's true, but
Yeah, I
it's
don't know.
impressive.
Well, that's pretty good, I guess. Well, I don't think I could have rose to that level of competition to where I could demand that type of money. Maybe I'd have to pay them a little bit, just like to get my books.
Yeah, I'm happy when they send me a pair of shoes, basically. So it's not
Yeah,
everyone that has a marketing appeal of someone like Tara. We had her on the show. She's great, actually. I think she's a good role model for people to follow, and I'm very happy for her. I think she deserves it.
yeah.
My big win is I volunteered for a bunch of hours last year, and they gave me race credit. So I signed up for a race using those race credits, so I didn't have to pay.
Nice. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Marshall, this is an ultra running show. We talk about hundreds to 250, and soon enough we'll be talking about 300 miles. But you've gone way farther than that. So what's the push? What do you just keep driving for? You did all the hundreds, I mean, back in the day, it was really, maybe 10 of them, right? At the time, at the most, and you've done them all. So and then you went Transcon, you've done the 7 summits. Gosh, you did every eco challenge of the old, and even I think the most recent one too, if I'm not mistaken, with Fuji with the Macy's, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
The
does that drive
Macy's.
come from? Yeah.
Well, I think because it kind of goes back to that just being very troubled and stuff and trying to make myself whole and trying to prove myself. I just didn't think I was worthy. And especially after my wife died, I felt like, there was some survivor's guilt there. And it's like, why did she die and why am I allowed to live? I don't know if I've ever really quite gotten over that. She's 30 years old when she passed away. And I got into my 50s and 60s and I began to feel like, well, it's okay for me to be here and stuff. But I think a lot of it was just, I had a troubled mind. And I think if you peel back the layers on a lot of ultra runners, maybe they're running away from something. Yeah, I don't know. It serves a purpose. And as long as it, helps you survive, that's one thing. But, I did, thoroughly enjoy the challenge of it too. So that was a secondary part of it. And I just loved, to a certain extent, I felt like I had to go out and almost punish myself. And I kind of got over that, after about 20 years or so, if you can believe it. But I began to just enjoy it and just slow down, take my time, talk to people and, just, just be as down to earth as I could about it all. And, I still think that I've never thought that people who do distances, 100 miles, 200 miles, whatever, I don't think they're extraordinary. I think, everybody can do it. It's just whether or not they want to. And I think, some people have some physical limitations, sure. But, I really never thought it was that extraordinary in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, with the right work and the right mindset, I think it's more accessible than a lot of people realize. I think
Yeah.
the breaking point is that some people are physically more gifted also, and I think not everyone could be a pro runner and run, Western in 14 hours, even with infinite amount of training. I would never reach that. So it's humbling sometimes to see what other people can do. But if you focus on yourself, comparison is the thief of joy. You focus on yourself, what you can do, then you can do things that you look back and say, wow, that was epic, or wow, that was really stupid. One follow-up question I have with how you kind of came in the sport and pursued bigger and bigger goal. I don't associate ultra running and trail running so much with risk taker, but doing the 7 summit is definitely more of a risk taking kind of behavior. Maybe not reckless, but there's definitely a life risk to doing these things. Would you say you're also seeking that adrenaline of risk, or it's really pushing your physical and fitness limit?
Yeah. And, being on Everest, I did that. Gosh, it's been over 20 years ago, and the equipment has changed a little bit. And I did it from the north side just because it was cheaper than the south side. And I climbed with a bunch of Russians who were, just a bunch of knuckleheads. I really enjoyed them. But I never thought that, like with the ultra running, that, it was a big risk, pretty much any of it. And Everest, I thought, was a bit risky because at that time, even when I went up, I think there was maybe 120 or so that summited, and there were from the north side where I was, and 7 of them died. So, the percentage of people dying was more like 5%, which is, it's probably less than 1% now. But I felt comfortable within myself the whole time I was on Everest. And I think a lot of it had to do with having that experience of all that ultra running and knowing the limits that my body, was able to go, as well as the adventure racing, because we had experience, climbing mountains and rope work and stuff like that on snow, crampons, so on and so forth. So I felt pretty comfortable on Everest for the most part. And, once again, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but what really made it tough is just what made it technical was the altitude. And that's something that, is just a whole different animal. It's just kind of a couple of steps and then you have to stop and catch your breath and stuff like that. And boy, if you think you're out of shape, if you get on Everest, you really think you're out of shape, but you're not. So, yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I read that you did them all on your first attempt, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, once again, I'm kind of a cheap guy, so I figured I had one shot at them. And then, like with Everest, I thought if I don't make it up the first time, I'm not going to go back. And, if you go down to Vinson, which is in Antarctica, I spent about $50,000 for all of them. Some of them I just climbed on my own. So I tried to do it as cheaply as possible. But Mount Vinson in Antarctica, it was $25,000, and that was 20 years ago. I have no idea how much it is now. So I really felt like I had to make it count. And so, I would kind of, watch for the, opportunistic windows and stuff to get up and just take my time and be patient with myself. And, I figured I had one shot at it, especially the big mountains, like something like Aconcagua or something. I've been up it a few times. So, it's not that big of a deal. And Kilimanjaro, that type of thing. But especially Vincent and Everest, you really have to make them count, And the same thing with running across America. I went out there and started that, and I thought, God damn, I am going to do this right now. And this is it, because I'm not coming back here to do this again. So, anyhow, yeah.
And you're referencing was it 2010 Run Across America called Running America, the documentary?
That might be when the documentary came out. I actually ran it in 2008, and I was 57 then, so I was a little bit older. I wanted to do it back in the early 90s when, gosh, I was in my late 30s or 40s, but I was raising kids and stuff like that, and I just couldn't take the time off to do it, so I had to wait until I was older, and they were pretty well grown. It takes a while to get across.
Yeah, that was amazing. I love that documentary. I was trying to revisit it today. I watched a bunch of the trailers on YouTube earlier today in preparation for this conversation because I'm pumped about it. Most recently, you've created an event called the Route 66 Ultra Run. Could you want to tell us a little bit about that and where that came from and fruition and how that all came about?
Yeah, so it came about. In fact, I was talking about the winter Badwater. I did that for a fundraiser, and I've been doing other fundraising, over the years. Like I did the Quad Badwater as a fundraiser, and gosh, we raised a bunch of money with that. And then with this other, I think we've raised, over $1 million over the years that I've been active doing fundraising. But then I turned my focus to the Alzheimer's Association. And a lot of that had to do with my friend Mark Macy,
Mm-hmm.
who you saw on, the world's toughest race, which is Fiji, and that's Mark Burnett and Bear Grylls and all that good stuff. But Mark was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at the age of 65. He's 70 now. And so I thought, I have to raise money for that. So I did that winter Badwater and raised probably $16,000. And then we decided the next year to make it sort of an annual thing. And so I told my wife, let's, we go down to Arizona in the winter. And so I told her, I said, I wonder what the longest stretch of Route 66 that exists, where it is, and, so on. So I did some research, and lo and behold, it was just north of Lake Havasu where we go down to. And it goes from Seligman all the way to Topop 66 on the Colorado River, which is 140 miles. And so my wife and I actually started at I-80. So there's a stretch, another 17 miles, and we did that entire stretch. And my wife and I did a marathon a day for 6 days, and we raised money for the Alzheimer's Association. And while we were out there doing it, I turned to her and I said, why in the hell hasn't anybody come up with an ultra marathon out here? This is just spectacular. It's just like a blast from the past. And so we kind of got hooked on it. And so sure enough, lo and behold, I guess it was about 7 or 8 months later, we held the first, race. And one of our goals was to make it, and part of the slogan for it, or whatever you want to call it, the branding is race for everyone. So it's 140 miles of history, which, dates way back to the Bunyan Derbies in 1928, where the Bunyan Derbies ran all of Route 66 across the United States. And it was on that very portion that exists. So, it's a step back into history, and then it's a race for everyone. So take, for instance, if somebody wants to come out and they think they can do it, I don't care. I don't need to know what the resume is. All they have to have is the passion to do it and the will to do it, and they can come out and try. And we've had a number of people that have come out, one of which, I guess it was last year, he'd never run anything as much as a 5K, and he came out and finished the race. So there's a lot of people that come out and do it. We have a liberal 60-hour cutoff on it. So it allows people, you can walk, as long as you can walk like 2.5 miles per hour or something like that, you can finish it. So, I just wanted to make it a race for everyone. This year we have a relay team division now, and we had some people from Texas that came out, and they all had disabilities, it was more mental disabilities and stuff like that, and they came out and finished it. So, it's just heartwarming to see people come out. We had one gal that last year, she told me that she weighed, I think it was 270 pounds, and she was probably, I would say, 5'3". And she came up to me at the race, and here's this big woman, and she looks at me and she shakes her finger and she says, I'm coming back next year and I'm going to do this race. So there she was at the starting line. She weighed 135 pounds.
Oof.
She lost half of her weight, came out the next year, and she finished it.
That's
so
a great story.
Stuff like that, so it's a race for everybody. Those are just a couple of examples. We're excited about it.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know if you're familiar with the Disney movie Cars in Monitor Springs. Like, that's what I'm envisioning. Is that like kind of the scenery?
Absolutely.
Because I believe that's like literally Route 66 or depicted in, of course, a Disney animation or something along those lines.
That's exactly right. And so Radiator Springs is the same as Cool Springs that you go by. There's Thimble Mountain, and that's part of the backtrack. So a lot of that artistry came from that very section, as well as other sections of Route 66. And it's, really true, because I-80 bypassed that and it was forgotten. So the storyline is actually accurate. And in fact, they even took it off the maps as far as an official highway or whatever. And then I think it was I'm not sure about this. I think it was in 1986 or something. It was designated, Arizona's portion of it was designated as historic. And then other states adopted it all the way to Chicago, all the way to Monica, the pier. Yeah, then it became historic, the entire route. So, it kind of started right there in Seligman, where we start the race and the founder of it is, his name is Angel Delgadillo, and he's 97 years old. He came out and started the race when he was 95. His daughter comes out and has started it the last 2 years. But it started right there in Seligman, where we start, and it goes all the way, as I said, to Topox 66 on the Colorado River.
They're starting the runners in the event, the gentleman
Yes.
And now his daughter. Okay, yeah. I was like, man, he started the race at 95 years old. I was thinking he was a participant.
No, but, the interesting, going back to that, it's a race for everyone. This year we had a 17-year-old, and then you guys know Bob Becker, 79 years old, and he comes out and nails it.
Jeez, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I believe that you just had the third annual, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. And in 2 years, it'll be the 100th anniversary of, when it was dedicated as an official Route 66. So with that, and we're going to have a big to-do out there in the race after this next one coming up.
Mentioning big to-dos, what about the big to-do Stanley Cup trophy? What is that all about?
It's like the Stanley Cup, and it looks, uncannily like it. We never, but I sourced this cup out, and it's a silver cup. It looks like the Stanley Cup, basically. Sourced it out. It's over 100 years old. It was made in England, and in fact, Remo has won it the last couple of years, and it's a traveling trophy. So Remo gets to keep it for 1 year, and then it goes on to the next winner, just like the Stanley Cup. So, we like to do things just a little bit differently, a little bit unique. And so if you run the race and finish under 60 hours, you get a brass buckle. For a silver buckle, you got to go sub 30. There's one person who's done that. And for a gold buckle, and nobody's been able to attain that, you got to run it in 24 hours or under. Something to shoot for.
Something for somebody else to shoot for.
Well, yeah, most definitely not me.
Not me either.
Simon, you're up.
Yeah, what, a 10-minute mile for 140 miles?
I think so.
Yeah. It's going to be a tough one to get.
Yeah, but I love it. It's the dangly carrot that like somebody needs. Somebody will get it for sure. Yeah.
I would have loved to have had something like that when I was out there running. I don't think I could have ever gotten it, but there's you don't know unless you try.
We talked a lot about your Badwater experiences, and just for reference, Simon ran it in 23, and I crewed him and paced him in 23 for Badwater. So we're less familiar than you are, but we are familiar with Badwater itself and its lack of aid stations. Is this the kind of same format? Do you have aid stations set up out there, or are you doing it with just the crew that's supporting you?
Well, it was originally sort of patterned after Badwater, where you have to have a couple of crew people, and then you can go out and do it one runner, or there can be two runners, and two people can crew for the two runners, and that's kind of the max for that. But then last year we opened it up to a relay team, so you can have relay teams of 4, 5, or 6. And then this year, what we did is opened up a journeyman division, and so there are 3 time stations that do have aid for the journeyman, and then we have 2 people that are roving on the course, and you have to be independent for up to 20 miles, and they have a roving aid station that fills in between, so you don't go more than 20 miles without some sort of aid. So a person can go out there with a crew and do it entirely. In fact, we had 4 entrants this year. We wanted to hold it, keep it low and kind of fine tune it and everything. Next year, we'll have a cap of 10 people for that journey runner division.
How hot does it get over there? 20 miles can be a long time if it's anywhere near Badwater heat, but I assume it's not.
No, it isn't, because it's always, November 11th was when it was designated Route 66. And so we always have it around the weekend, the second weekend in November. So the temperatures at the start, they're close to freezing, and then they'll get up to about 60, 65. Then you get closer to the Colorado River, because it's basically downhill. You're starting at 5,000 feet and going down to about 1,000 feet. So it can get a little bit warmer down there. It's usually 70, 80 degrees. So that's the beauty of it. You don't need to take a whole lot of water. It's nothing like Badwater. So you don't need a whole lot out there. Average temperature is probably, I would say, 55 degrees throughout the whole race.
That's pretty manageable. That's great, yeah.
Makes it easy, guys. You got to come out and do it. I like to say that people say, gosh, 5K is tough or 10K is tough. And it's like, the race that you're doing, like Ken Klober would say, what's the toughest race? I asked him, I said, what's the toughest race? And he says, it's the one that you're doing, at the time.
That's right.
So, yeah.
That's such a Ken line. That's such a Ken line.
Yeah, it's a great line. But, 140 miles is nothing to sneeze at. And, take, for instance, people would ask me, why do you think you're getting injured so much when I was running across the United States and stuff like that? And I try and say, I think to myself and I'd say, well, it's because, the camber of the road, it's kind of, making me run wanky, or it's the heat, or I don't get my calories in. And finally, we got about halfway across the United States, and I looked at my wife and I said, I've got the perfect answer. It's the miles.
That's right.
It's the
That's right.
miles, stupid. And so that accounts for everything. Everything that goes wrong, it's the miles.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm feeling that right about now. I've had some Achilles issues in the last few months that I'm working through. So working
Mm.
my way through that, but I'll be back for sure.
A little advice as far as Achilles, that started bothering me when I was out at Badwater. And a good solution for it is you take if your shoe heel comes up and wraps around, just slit it down the middle about a half to three quarters of an inch and relieve that pressure so you
Mm.
don't have the pressure of the shoe against your Achilles. That's a lot of where it comes from. One of the things, anyhow.
Yeah, actually, it's I am looking at different heel cups in different shoes, but I could take the shoes I currently have and do that for sure. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, shoes are expendable. So if you're getting a blister like on the outside of one shoe or something, and you're not on a trail or whatever, just cut a hole right where that is, and away you go.
They might have been expendable, Marshall, when Badwater was $12.50, but gosh, I think they're $300 or just about $300 this day and age. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the shoes, and I used to, get them for free. I was sponsored by High Tech, who was the original,
Mhm.
people that put on the race for that Badwater 146 shoe is what they had, and so they'd give me free shoes and stuff, and they were a sight to behold. They were leather, and they had a thin sole that was about three quarters of an inch, and the sole was pretty well rock hard. And then right where your heel is, they had two different plugs. One was, I don't know, it was like 7 pounds, and then they had a 9 pound plug. So if you were a little bit heavier runner, you'd put a little bit, a 9 pound plug. If you were lighter weight, you use, say, a 7 pound plug in there. Well, what I found running trails and stuff, what would happen is that laid on the top of the outsole, or, what met the ground, and I would punch that thing right through the bottom. So
Mm.
the shoes were a little bit something to be desired. I still have more of them, but they were leather, strictly leather. That was it.
Jeez. It's funny because I actually am familiar with High Tech because when I was in the service, they were the
Yes.
choice of military boot at the time that I was in the service. They were sought after at every PX on base.
They had a huge government contract and they wanted to break into the running, venue. And I don't think it was very successful for them, but you're absolutely right. That's where they made their money.
Mm-hmm. Marshall, what do you think this Route 66 Ultra Marathon could be someday? Like, what do you envision, like the 5-year, 10-year plan of it?
Well, we'd like to expand it to, we had 50 runners. We'd like to expand it. I'm almost positive it's going to be 100 runners or more, but I don't want to see it get any larger than 200 runners, if even that. We're just going to grow it gradually. So, at the outside, if we had a couple of runners, our goal is to just break even with it at this point. Our love of the sport, it's, if you love something so much, you can sacrifice a little bit here and there and grow it into what it needs to be. But we want to keep it very low key and intimate, and have it be like a family affair almost. We have just a terrific banquet at the end, and I mean, it is, there's prime rib, there's chicken parmesan, we have a band, we have all sorts of things going on, and it's right on the Colorado River. I venture to say that it's one of the best, if not the best banquet that you'll ever come to.
Well, now you're making me hungry. Um, Marshall, gosh, again, I keep just repeating this because it's just amazing. You've done just so many things. I mean, just so many things in the endurance world. I mean, from the Seven Summits to Transcons, all the things, right? Is this passion project, this race, is this helping fill that void and getting you still in the space without actually having to do the running?
Yeah, yeah, and thanks for asking that. And I think hit the nail on the head. You get a little bit older. I'm 73 years old now. I can't do what I used to do, but I still like to do the long distances. I've had some physical challenges with my back that I have to get straightened out and things like that. But you're absolutely right. It does fill that void. And I love the people that are associated with it. It's just wonderful people, and most of them don't have any agendas. They're just out there to just be out there, to be, and in fact, not to not to plug my second book, but it's called Both Feet on the Ground. But, I delve into that. Basically, putting away gadgets, your cell phone, stuff like that. That's kind of the common theme behind it. And getting back to nature, getting out as often as you can. So, and for as long as you can. So that's the theme of the book, and that's kind of my goal, to just get people out there doing things. And if they want to do more, they can do more, such as ultra running. But just to encourage anybody to get out for any amount of time, even if it's for a walk around the block. It's gonna kind of set the mind straight.
Yeah, I was looking under my desk here. That's why my head was away from the camera. But I was looking for the book, but it's on my other bookshelf upstairs. It's the one you mailed me.
Was that Both Feet on the Ground?
Yeah,
Or-
you mailed me the Both Feet on the Ground one. I have the other one already.
Oh,
You mailed
Running
me
on
both.
Empty.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. I had the Running on Empty already
Yeah.
taken care of. And that's how I
Yeah.
knew who you were. But anyway.
Yeah.
Marshall, you mentioned, gosh, I don't know if I want to put the spoiler alert out there, but I am potentially going to do the Grand Slam this year. I need to get into Vermont. And if you're looking at Simon's screen, he's got the Grand Slam bird up there, one of those corners. Oh, both sides.
Yeah, I see that. You've done it twice?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Fun time.
So what kind of advice do you have for me for the Grand Slam this year if I make it into Vermont? That's the holdup at this point.
Yeah. It's probably a lot tougher just because, you have to get into all of them. So, I don't
That's
know
the easy part. I got to do the work after that.
But, I would say, don't let it scare you off. At that time, I mean, it seemed like it was kind of a big deal or whatever. There weren't that many people that had actually done it, maybe 10 or 20 at the most when I did it. And one of my goals was to sort of indicate to people that they could do more than they thought they could. So that means, more events, longer distances, and also not to hold back. So when I first did the Grand Slam +2, which is the last great race, I finished top 10 in 5 of the 6. So, I mean, I was running them hard. And I think it was Joe Cooljack, or he came around, I guess it was 20 years later or so, and then broke my record of, the combination of them all. But what I would say is, I don't know if I would necessarily take that approach. I don't know how you did it, Simon. Maybe back off a little, because people saw me out there running hard, and I just thought to myself, I don't give a damn if I'm going to finish them all. I just want to go out there and give it the best shot that I can for each one individually. And, of course, a lot of it has to do with the recovery. And at that time, I was probably in my 50s. Simon, how old are you?
30.
Oh, my God. You're getting up there, buddy.
I'm getting there, but I'm still good. I'm still below the threshold.
Time's a wasting. Well,
Yeah.
You've got 2 of those suckers, so I mean, you're on the right track.
Yeah, but a top 10 at Western is not in my foreseeable future.
Yeah.
I can't
Not
even
even
make,
close.
I can't even make top 10 on the wait list.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
but it's true. I think that's definitely something that is a little bit different in planning a season. I'm smack in the middle of planning next year, and there's so many lotteries and there's so many unknowns. And then if you say you want to do Badwater, well, you got to wait until February to know if you're in. But then you have lottery that happen in December and January. Do I put my name in or do I not? And then you will have conflict. And then fast recovery. I've done 100 marathons as 1 week after another, and that's definitely not enough. 3 weeks is kind of decent, and then if you want to be competitive, it's probably 2 months. But yeah, it's about focusing on recovery. And just for people to know that when you say the 6th great race, I say it wrong all the time, but they know what I'm saying. So just to say the name, like it's Old Dominion, Angeles Crest, Vermont, Western, Leadville, Wasatch. Is that it? Yeah.
Are we missing one? Did you get 6?
That's 6, but I didn't say Badwater in them. I don't know if Badwater is one of them.
No, you're right. That's correct. So
Yeah.
there was the traditional 4, the Grand Slam, and then they added,
Vermont.
Vermont, yep.
Yeah, that came along, so that made 6. So yeah.
Yeah, Brian, by the way, since you didn't ask me for advice and you didn't ask me to sign your bib, I'm still going to give you a tip. If you do Old Dominion can be sneaky hard. it's not a hard race, but you only have 28 hours. And if it's the first year I did it, it was super hot and wet. Really, that knocked me out. And the last 25 miles is definitely harder than the first 75. So you think like, oh, it's so easy. I'm running on the road. It's pretty chill. And then they make you do some East Coast kind of trail, and then you're slowing down, and then you're like, oh man, I only have 28 hours, not 30 hours, which is also, my brain is used to thinking 30 hours is the cutoff. 28 hours, like it's only 2 hours difference. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but
basically.
I would agree with you, Simon. I came to the conclusion that 2 weeks is not enough, not quite enough to recover for 100. 3 weeks, is manageable, and that's what the average was when I did them. And 4 weeks, I could pretty well run them hard and recover enough. So it's amazing. But I think the other emphasis is everybody's a little bit different, and I think age has a certain amount of to do with it. If you're younger, you're going to recover quicker. So, but a lot of it's genetic, and so on and so forth. So you kind of have to go with what you got.
Yeah,
And
it's genetic, Brand. You're either fucked or you're not, but it's too late to change anything. Just do it,
yeah,
and you'll figure it out. But you've done, what was it, 2 years ago? You did a lot of races over that similar period of time. So it's going to be similar, I think.
It's pretty
I
similar
think,
to my
yeah.
my mountain slam of 23 or so, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many things out there that are going on. I don't know how you choose between what anymore. It's just wow. I mean,
We're
it's
not the one choosing.
wow.
Western decide who's doing what. Western and Hard Rock decide what I'm racing this year. It's that simple. I give up all control over my racing season. But
Well,
yeah,
Amy, if Amy's listening from Vermont, I really need in Amy because I've already signed up for the other 3 races. And
you're already in for Leadville? I guess you're 10-year buckle. It makes sense.
Yeah, I'm in for Leadville.
Yeah, and if it makes any difference, it's Amy, is it?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. If it makes any difference, Amy, I will sign his number 1 race bib, not on the back but on the front, and that will give him good luck.
Well, maybe Marshall, you could mail her a book, a signed book.
I can do that. I guarantee it. Yes, both of them.
Perfect. Well, that should be a shoe-in then, actually. Yeah.
Right.
But Amy is great, actually. I really like what they're doing up there. But I know that Vermont has struggled in the past few years. I think they had like 3 or 4 cancel over a 5-year period for various reasons. There was an infectious disease that we cannot say the name on podcasts in general. And then there was a flooding also one year. So yeah, I think they struggle a little bit, but she's great. And they encourage also a runner with disability. When I was racing it, there was a blind runner doing it. And we had another episode recently with the triathlete that is blind that did the Paralympics. So I think when we think about making the sport accessible to everyone, I think she's doing her work there, and that's great. So really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm just teasing Amy. We did email back and forth. I just asked her what my chances were and if there was anything I could do to help my chances. And she said, no, it's a lottery. And that's fair. And I get it. But it did come from an adults adaptive camp email address. And so I believe that's Amy's connection to the adaptive community. So that's great. I did read that in their bio. That's a really great cause.
Yeah. Well, it's great. The more that these, race directors try and make it all inclusive as they can, the more I'm for it. I'm all about that.
They even let horse races for that one. So that's how inclusive they are. It's not even limited to human. And I beat one horse, by the way. Well, a group of horses. I was really proud of that one.
Yeah. So Vermont, that was the first year. And I ran it, was part of the 6. And, you guys know Eric Clifton? He won it. He was right in front of me. He ran, God, I don't know what it was. It was about 15 hours or something. And I was behind him, I don't know, at about 16 hours or whatever. And there was one horse that came in front of me. He didn't beat Eric, but the one horse was sandwiched in between Eric and I. And at the end, there was a bunch of protesters saying animal cruelty, and they're up there, marching back and forth. And I come running across the line, and I'm thinking to myself, hey, what about me? I feel left out.
Those animals probably live better than I do. They probably eat better than I do, too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that because I didn't know much about endurance running for horses, but they do have a lot of medical checkups, so it's
Mhm.
actually it's pretty good, and it's similar to I'm from Canada, so sorry if I'll be very Canadian here, but dogs that will sludge that dog, they're
Oh, sled
actually
dogs.
super
Yep.
happy to go racing and running. Like that's what they want to do there.
Hmm.
That's in their gene. Like they want to go running. They don't want to be sitting on the couch. And these horses, same thing. I saw them and they were definitely not in a bad mood. Definitely not struggling, despite the fact that sometimes it can be pretty hot. But at the same time, the race is forcing that kind of medical checkup all the time, which made it interesting because we were leapfrogging each other all the time. The horse were definitely faster than me on the uphill and a little bit on the flat. The downhill, I was faster, and then they would stop, have their checkup. They would pass me, would say hi. So it created, I don't know, a cool dynamic that I really liked. But yeah, I didn't
Is
see
there
protester.
is there a rider on the horse? I'm completely foreign to this whole concept. Is Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So you're just not somebody running next to it. I mean, I guess that would be somebody would be running their own 100 mile, I guess, with a horse. But yeah, I guess so. There's a rider on the horse. Okay.
yeah,
I guess
yeah.
the horse
Otherwise, they
doesn't
would.
know its way. I answered my
Yes,
own question. Thanks, Simon.
they would cut the course. They would cheat. Horses are famous for cutting courses, so you have to have a rider telling him where to go.
Well, Marshall, I don't want to hold you any longer. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the conversation. There's a strong chance you might see me in the Route 66 Ultra Run in the near future. I was thinking about potentially next year, but we'll see about this Grand Slam. But if not, the 100-year anniversary sounds like a pretty fun time too.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be great. Love to have you guys
We
or
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it
anybody
would be
else.
great. I mean, especially you have the option of journeyman. That makes
Hmm.
it a little bit simpler than to convince my wife to leapfrog me for what did we say, sub 24? I don't know, sub 30.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Golden buckle, the golden buckle.
I had to do some fast talking to my wife because she didn't particularly like that idea. But that's the type of thing I would have loved to have had, as an option when I was back running. So I thought,
Yeah,
that'd be pretty cool. And I think it's going to become very popular.
If
yeah,
you
yeah, for sure.
get like 10 people that get the golden buckle, do you go to like a 22-hour platinum buckle or something?
Are, are you, as long as they pay for it themselves?
Fair enough. Fair
Sure.
enough. You'll cross that bridge when you get to it, right, Marshall?
Right.
Well, again, we appreciate your time. So great to catch up. Again, such a legend in the space. I appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to chat with us lonely ultra runners down here.
Yeah. Well, I feel pretty proud of myself because I didn't fall asleep. 73 years old. I need my naps.
I had to take a
Yeah.
nap so we could record this episode, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
But yeah, no, we appreciate the time and know it's late. But also, I really want to say we appreciate everything you've done to make the sport what it is today. Just the way you are, you and you people. It sounds weird to say you people, but you guys, the pioneers. I think the sport is what it is in big part for who kind of started and made it a thing. It was definitely not mainstream back then, and even it took a while to become mainstream. But growing a community that is supportive has been very important. We can see that being reflected in the event that you're organizing. That so really happy to support that. As Ryan said, I might show up someday. And I need some convincing with my wife first. It's easier to convince her to race Hurt in Hawaii than Road 66.
I get it.
It is what it is. Let's just say it like that.
Just
Well,
watch the
thank God.
Cars movie. Just watch the Cars movie. Maybe she'll buy
Yes,
in.
that's true. I'll do
Yes.
that.
So yeah, I want to thank you guys too, and I think you've given me way too much credit. There's people that have come before me that have done much more than I have, and so, but I do appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys, and good luck with all your exploits, and we'll see you down the road somewhere, I'm sure.
Thanks, Marshall. Appreciate it.
I was about to do it wrong. I'm Simon, and that's Brian.
We'd be thrilled to connect with you beyond our show.
For all of your endurance coaching requirement, you can reach out to Coach Brian at altitudeendurancecoaching.com.
To explore more of Simon's content, visit Running with Simon on YouTube.
Don't forget to rate, like, and share our content regularly.
Your support means a lot to us. Thanks.